Alright, Friday, November the 2nd, and I'm just sitting in the parking lot of a new Asian grocery store that just opened up by us yesterday. I actually tried to shop here last night, but it was an absolute zoo. You couldn't even find a place to park. So I'm back here today, and we are going to be buying some Asian ingredients to make something special for dinner tonight. So, I'll bring you back when we get back home with our bounty. Alright, we're back from our adventure to T&T Market, and we've got a bunch of ingredients to play with in the kitchen today. Pretty cold and rainy out there today, and as you can see, winter is fast approaching here as the leaves have almost fallen from the trees. We're going to lose all that beautiful color. Anyway, let's make something warm and comforting. Well, we've got a big empty bowl here, so we need to fill that up with something. And as you know, I made a trip to the Asian market today. So I think what we're going to do today is we're going to make a nice steaming hot bowl of ramen noodles with some braised pork belly. We'll be right back. Alright, so here we go. So what we're going to make today is a ramen noodle dish that is actually going to be garnished with a braised pork belly. It's going to have a chicken based broth with a shoyu or soy seasoning base to it. And then we're going to have a few other garnishes that we'll top the noodles with when we get to that point. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But I want to break this down into its components. So what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about braising this pork belly. Okay, as mentioned, we're going to break this recipe down into its components. So we're going to start with the pork belly first, since the pork is going to take about 2.5 hours to braise until it's fully tender. So this is a pork belly here on the counter. We've got about 2.5 pounds of pork belly here. It could be less, it could be more. It's really entirely up to you, but I'm basing this recipe on about a 2 to 2.5 pound piece. If you're not familiar with pork belly, if you look at the side of it, you can sort of see where this comes from. This is actually, you're probably more familiar with bacon. If you're from Canada, you're definitely more familiar with bacon than you are with pork belly. Obviously, bacon is a cured and smoked version of this, while this is the raw product. So as I mentioned, we're going to cut this into longer strips and use that for the recipe. If you had a larger piece, a larger rectangular or square piece, you could actually roll this pork and braise it. That's normally what you would do if you're making chashu pork. You would actually roll it and tie it so it looks something like a pinwheel when you slice it. Something similar to pancetta if you're of Italian origin and you've had pancetta before, which is a rolled style of bacon. Again, that's another version of how you could actually cook this. But again, I'm going to be just doing some sort of thinner slices, and we're going to be braising it that way. So for the rest of the recipe, you're going to need 1 cup of water. You're going to need a ½ cup of soy sauce, and I've got 2 different varieties of soy sauce here. This is a lower sodium soy sauce. This is the full strength soy sauce or full salt soy sauce. We're probably going to go with the full salt version of this. You're going to need some sake, and this is a cooking sake. You could actually buy sake from the liquor store if you wanted to. You're going to need a ½ cup of sake. You're going to need a ½ cup of mirin. Mirin is a rice wine that we're going to use. You need a ¼ cup of white sugar. You could use brown sugar if you wanted to. You could use something like a palm sugar. We're going to need 4 cloves of garlic. So I've got a full head of garlic here. We'll just break that into cloves and get that peeled. We're going to need a 2-inch piece of ginger peeled and sliced. And we're going to need about 4 green onions or so. Okay, we've gone ahead and sliced our pork belly into 2 equal portions, as you can see. We've got a pan heating up on the fire over here over high heat, and we're going to get some a little bit of canola oil for this pan. Anyway, there's a number of different ways to do this. I particularly like to sear my pork belly first before I braise it, but you can actually, I've seen people boil it first. I've seen people actually just braise it directly without searing it or boiling it. But I like to sear mine to get some caramelization and color before I actually add it to the liquid ingredients in order to braise it. So anyway, we're going to move it to the pan and sear it now. Okay, so we've got the pan on high heat. Sorry about the fan noise, but I'm going to make a lot of smoke in here, and the fire alarms are probably going to go off as per usual when I cook. I'm going to add a little touch of canola oil or vegetable oil into the pan, and we're going to grab our pork belly. Again, you want a nice hot pan. And we're going to start skin side down. And you basically just want to cook this pork until it's brown on all sides. I haven't seasoned it with anything. You got to remember that the soy sauce that this is going to be braised in is going to be quite salty, so you got to be careful with the salt. I'll probably add a little bit of black pepper. That's I like black pepper, so I'm going to add a little bit of black pepper to this. But other than that, most of the flavoring is going to be coming from the braising liquid that this is braised in. So we'll just go ahead and let that cook until it's brown on all sides. I'll bring it back when it's done. Okay, so we've got our nicely browned pork belly here. So we're just going to add that now to the our braising pot, and we're going to use this heavy bottomed cruzette dish. Sort of a retro look to it with that orange. So we're just going to put our pork belly pieces. As you can notice that I've ended up with 4 pieces. I actually just detached. There was a natural separation in the meat, so I've just detached where it naturally separated. So we're going to put it in the braising pan, skin side up, and then we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. There you go. It's not too tight in there, which is good. So that looks good. Just grab a paper towel here. Get rid of this. See if you can see okay. It looks like you can. Okay, so then we're going to add the rest of our ingredients for the braising liquid. So as I mentioned, you need a half a cup of soy sauce, a half a cup of sake, and a half a cup of mirin for this. You also need a 1/4 cup of sugar. So I have the sugar here measured, 1/4 cup. We're going to add it to that sake, mirin, soya. We'll just add it directly to that, and we'll just grab a spoon here and mix that in. And then we'll add that into the pork. Just let that sugar dissolve a little bit. So we'll add that directly in over top of the pork. Scrape that sugar out. To that we need to add some water. We can rinse our bowl out. This is 1 cup of water. Okay. Then we needed to add some ginger and garlic. And we just got about a 2-inch piece of ginger here. We're just going to do some slices on the ginger. Just some long slices, fine. Drop that in there. Ginger is really to taste. If you like lots of ginger, put lots of ginger in. I've asked for 4 cloves of garlic for this recipe. However, the cloves are pretty darn big, if you can see how big that clove is. So I'm going to reduce down to probably 3 cloves if they are that size. Actually, I'll go with 3 cloves that are this size. You can see that there. Oh! Be right back. Okay, we're back. Actually, I think we'll downsize the garlic to 3 sort of regular sized cloves, or they're a little larger than regular size. So let's go with 3 cloves of garlic. And we're just going to smash those with the back of a knife. Let me move this over here. Move this over here. Just with this heavy knife, we'll just crush these a little bit. Put those in. And then the last thing we have are the green onions. And again, we're just going to probably cut these into 3. There's 4 green onions here. Just cut those, toss them in. We'll mix those in a little bit with the braising liquid, just to get them in there. So that's looking pretty good. All right. Everything's tucked in there nicely. So next step is into the oven. So we're going to braise this in the oven. We've got the oven set on 350 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll put a lid on this and braise this for about 2 hours. We'll give it a quick check. I expect this is probably going to braise for at least 2.5 to 3 hours before we're ready to take the pork out. So we'll check it after 2 hours and we'll go from there. Okay, we're about an hour into braising the pork belly, and just taking it out of the oven. What we're going to do is just turn it over now and put the fat side down. We're going to recover it and braise it for another hour. Okay, we're just coming up to the 2-hour mark on the braised pork belly, and we'll give that a quick check when the timer goes off. We're going to start now working on the garnishes for our ramen noodle bowl, and my particular favorites are bean sprouts, and we're just going to blanch those in boiling salted water. I'm going to do a little daikon. We're just going to do a little julienne or a little grated daikon, and we're going to put that in raw, and we'll just stir it into the broth. We're going to definitely do some green onions or scallions, whatever you want to call them, and I'm going to do some king oyster mushrooms. So I've got some small, I'm going to call them baby, well actually they say baby king oyster mushrooms on them, so because these are normally quite large. So I'm just going to roast these whole. So I'm going to just toss them with a little bit of olive oil, salt, and pepper, throw them in the oven, and roast them until they're nice and tender, and we'll use those for garnish on top of our ramen noodles. So we're going to get to work on that. We're also going to get to work on our stock, and I'll bring you back for that. Okay, here goes our bean sprouts in our boiling salted water. Just going to blanch these probably for about 1 minute. And then we're going to refresh them under cold running water and ice. We want to stop the cooking, keep them nice and crispy. We'll just get those in there. Give them a little stir. Alright, bring that back to the boil. We've got our ice water standing by, so we'll take those off after a minute. Okay, for our baby king oyster mushrooms, just a little bit of olive oil just over the top, and we've got some sea salt, I like black pepper, a little bit of black pepper. Give them a toss. And we'll put them in a little roasting dish here. Like so. And we'll get those in the oven. We'll roast them in a 400-degree oven until they're golden brown and tender. And then we'll reserve them for a garnish on top of our ramen noodles. Okay, pork belly is out of the oven. Here's our 2-hour time check. We'll just lift that lid off carefully. Looking pretty good. I would say that is looking really good. It's nice and tender. So I think we're going to stop the braising process there. So we'll just set this aside, let it cool down before we attempt to slice it. You could actually, if you wanted to, braise this ahead of time, then stick it in the refrigerator and then slice it when it's colder. It's obviously a lot easier to slice when it's chilled. You can also put the braising liquid in the fridge and let that cool overnight and defat it, and you can actually use the braising liquid as part of your ramen dish if you like, as part of you can use it as part of the broth. For example, you could stir it into the chicken stock and use the pork braise liquid as part of the ramen dish itself. And there's a quick look at the pork belly just standing by. There just happens to be this little piece on top here that we're going to try out. Fantastic. Can't wait for the ramen. Okay, we're going to start making our broth now, and again, as mentioned previously, this is a shoyu based broth, so it's a soya based broth. I'm going to be using chicken stock. Again, you could use a pork stock, a beef stock, a seafood stock, a veg stock, a seaweed stock. It's really up to your taste. Anyway, we've got a chicken stock here. We've got 4 cups of chicken stock. We've got 2 teaspoons of ginger. We've got 2 teaspoons of garlic. We've got 3 tablespoons of soy sauce and 2 tablespoons of mirin. We're going to sweat the garlic and the ginger off in a little bit of sesame oil and a little bit of canola oil, so probably about 1 teaspoon each of oil. And we've got a pot on the fire on low heat, so we'll move over there now. Okay, we've got our pot on low heat on the stove, so we're going to add a teaspoon of canola oil and a teaspoon of sesame oil, approximately. Then we're going to grab our garlic and ginger, add that to the pot, and we'll sweat this down. We don't want to brown this, so we'll just sweat this down until it's slightly softened. You notice that I've got this garlic and ginger fairly chunky. The intent is that I'm going to be straining this broth out. If you wanted to leave the garlic and ginger in, then you could most definitely mince that smaller and just leave it in, but I'm actually going to take it out. Alright, so we've got that sweated down a little bit and starting to soften. Again, you don't want to brown it. It starts to make it bitter, particularly if you burn it. So that's starting to be nice and fragrant. We'll grab our chicken broth. Add that in. We'll add our soy sauce and our mirin, and we'll bring that to a boil. There's the mirin. There's the soy sauce. So there's our ramen broth. Like I said, we'll bring that to a boil, and then we'll turn that down and let it simmer for about 5 minutes to infuse all that flavor. We'll strain it out and ready to go to the bowl. Okay, we're going to work on our daikon radish garnish, and I've got a fancy French-style mandolin here. Now you could cut these daikons into julienne strips by hand, but since I've got the mandolin here, I may as well go ahead and use it. So there is a guard for this that I don't use, so you just got to be awfully careful with these. They're very sharp. They are the maimer of many chefs. Won't go too far. So there we go. Nice julienne strips of daikon ready for garnish on top of the soup. We'll put them aside. And then the last thing we need to do for garnish is to slice our green onions, or scallions, whatever you want to call them. So what I like to do is just to flatten them a little bit with the edge of my knife. We're going to cut them on a bit of a bias, a bit of a maybe a 45-degree angle or so. I'm just going to make sure we cut all the way through. Keep your fingers curled as you move along, so you don't slice off any digits that you need. Go all the way to the end. And we'll put those in a bowl, set them aside. Oh, the king oyster mushrooms are done, so we'll grab those from the oven. Our broth is done. Just needs to be strained. There are the king oyster mushrooms, nicely browned. We've got our water boiling now for our ramen noodles. So we're getting pretty close to plating up. That will be the next step. Let me strain my broth, and we'll get the noodles in the water. The noodles only cook for about 1.5 minutes, so they cook very quickly. Then we'll remove them directly from the, we'll drain the water off them, and we'll place them in the bowl. Actually, the broth will go in the bowl first, place the noodles inside, then we'll garnish appropriately. So let's go ahead and slice a little bit of our braised pork belly. And I better not grab that with my hand, it might still be pretty hot. Even too hot for chef hands. Alright. So we probably want about 4 or 5 nice slices out of this. We don't want them too thick. Looking pretty good. And there's our nice pork belly slices. We'll just layer those out. Once we get to the noodles, we'll lay them out nicely. Something like that. So that's looking pretty good. Anyway, let's get the noodles boiled. Okay, the ramen noodles are done, so we're at the final plating stage. So we'll get the noodle bowl front and center. There we go. We will get our broth, and we'll just put as much as we feel that we're ready to consume. And I'm pretty hungry. So this is going to be a fairly full bowl. Let's say I put about 2 cups total of broth. That's 2 cups of the 4 cups that we did. Let me get you in focus a little bit more here. Alright, we'll drop our ramen noodles in here. Okay, we'll do a little garnish now. Maybe some of our bean sprouts. On this side of the bowl, over here, maybe a little bit of our julienne daikon. Over here, maybe some of our king oysters. Looking over here. And we'll put our pork on next. Right up front here. Looking good. And a final garnish with our green onions. And I think we're pretty much ready to eat. I'll give you one last shot of it close up in the bowl. Alright, there we go. That's my take on ramen. Again, it's not overly traditional. A lot of times you'll see soft boiled eggs in here. You may see seaweed. You may see other types of garnishes other than what I've got here. But this is what I like, so that's what I'm going with. Anyway, I'm going to enjoy this. Hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you'll try to make this at home. Bon appetit! Well, that was awesome. Maybe just one more little piece. Can't resist. Okay, maybe 2 little pieces.